up if you want. And he said, well, I'll have to talk to my tour bus driver and see if he's not too tired. So he did, and the guy agreed to come up. You know, he just came from Winnipeg the night before, so the poor guy was pretty tired. But they came up, and they were here from about 2:30 until 4 in the morning. And Billy played a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of different guitars and amps that he liked, and we did a little, you know, deal. He bought some of our Future pedals, which we manufacture here. We have a variety of people that are using them.
Is that your own brand name? Future?
Yes, we designed the pedal here. Ilich Chiliachki is the design engineer, and basically we've got White Zombie, who used them on their recording after the second day that they showed up in Los Angeles. We have them being sold in Japan and also locally. And what we can do with this is basically have it voiced specifically to an amplifier and a guitar. If we want, we can get that specific with the pedal, as opposed to sort of one-size-fits-all kind of approach. So Billy came in and he bought a few of those pedals, and he was really blown away with it, which is great because he's getting all this stuff always offered to him or given to him for free, you know, so it was a nice compliment. But the story we're open is I got on this tour bus at the front of the store in Yonge Street. It's like sort of barren except for a trail of cars with cameras and autograph hounds, you know. And I get on the bus and he says, knowing you, Ed, you know, I figured your sense of humor, you'd probably like this sign I made for you. He says, but get it, you know, get it plasticized, you know, get the plastic put on it. And so it's...
So this is actually his artwork?
Yeah, he actually did that. He's quite a graphic guy, you know. He's very conscious of style and image, and truly a creative, you know, brilliant man, you know, both musically and understands the concept of visuals. It's been our experience with most of the really successful people in the music industry. They're fairly comprehensive when it comes to the visual aspect as well as the musical.
Yeah. The majority of people coming here, obviously, the account will be Nick and Keith.
No.
Maybe you can tell me some about your regular customers. I seen the one guy from Q107 who was kind of quizzing you earlier there. Sure.
Well, basically, just to give you a little list, Jimmy Buffett's come in, Peter Fredette from Tom Cochran. We've supplied Tom Cochran with wireless microphones. Soul Asylum we've supplied with all kinds of equipment for their interactive specials. Rex Smith, who was here performing in North York, was our customer and bought guitars and amps. We've done business with Aerosmith, The Cult, a band called No Doubt, Marianne Faithfull, Rick Derringer, The Who, Cheap Trick. The double neck guitar that Gordy and Big Sugar plays is one that he bought from us. AC/DC, you know, Glue Leg, you know, we sold Andrew his bass and his amplifier, and the Four Horsemen did a record here, and we supplied them with everything right down to the pickups and their guitars. So we'll supply studios with recording equipment as well. The Spin Doctors, Mountain, Lenny Kravitz, Craig Ross, who's the guitar player for Lenny Kravitz, Styx, Nazareth, of course ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons as well as Dusty in that band. Dusty's bought some stuff from us.
Is this word of mouth? Or I know you had a website. How do you get use this?
It's over the years. Basically, I ended up by getting into the old guitar thing because I really didn't have money to buy a brand new guitar. And so consequently, what happened is I went out and just qualified the instrument as being it would have to be the best sounding, best feeling thing I could find on the wall, and it so happened to be the one that was in my budget. It wasn't very pretty because it wasn't an original finish or anything, but it turned out to be a 57 Strat, so I still have that to this day. And of course I'd go and I'd do recording sessions and so on, and the engineers would always say, well, you know, do you have any other amps or whatever that, you know, if there's any kind of sessions, that amp sounds great, could we borrow it sometime? And so one thing led to another, and a lot of engineers and studios would call me, and I ended up by, you know, lending people my guitars and amps, you know, that were like some fairly famous people, you know.
Have you always been here in Yonge?
We were further south on Yonge before, at 4744. Now we're at 5231 Yonge Street. And
phone
previous
number?
to that,
Phone number?
yeah, the phone number is 416. It's really easy to remember. 222-8222. And you know, we're always looking for like old and vintage guitars, and you know, the old Gibsons with the brown case and the pink lining, and the old Fenders with the tweed cases and stuff. These are tools you never know. Maybe one of your favorite rock and rollers will end up with using in you know, significant song or what have you. You just never know, because again, you know, you asked how do we get the word out. We do have a website, which is www.tundramusic.com, and we have done some business as far away as Australia on that. But you know, basically it is word of mouth is a large part of what we do. We also do repairs. Illich, being a design engineer in electronics, can repair anything electronic. And also we have Luthier Vadim Rubstoff, who's excellent, who also builds the handmade Vadim bases here. So word does get out, and over the years, you know, bit by bit, we have a database also of 14,000. And we also host Canada's Vintage Guitar Show every year, where we...
I was going to ask you, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Vintage Guitar Show.
The Vintage Guitar Show is going into its 6th year, and it will be June 7th and 8th this year at the Thornhill Community Center. And every year we donate a guitar for the Heart Transplant Research Group of the Toronto Hospital. And we have a lot of people out from all over. We bring people in from, you know, the States, Europe, all over the country, people with booths from all over the country. So we're doing our little unity thing, you know.
Was a number of vendors?
Yeah, about 60
different
different businesses and collectors and enthusiasts and all ages. I mean, we get people that played guitar in the Second World War, you know, entertaining the troops with their original guitar and their original wife, and then we get guys, you know, from Queen Street with bones through their nose, you know, playing the latest, you know, whatever.
How many people would attend that fair?
Well, on average, we've pretty much, you know, with all the guests and so on, probably in the 2,000 vicinity. So it's quite a good turnout. And we've had a lot of celebrities that have shown up, you know, and purchased things, which is kind of neat.
You're a musician yourself?
I am.
Yeah. Maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm just writing songs. Right now, there's a gentleman by the name of Pete Barbeau who just had a song on Celine Dion's record, who I'm doing a little bit of writing with in the next little while. And previous to that, we did a remake of a song called Mississippi Queen with Rich Dodson and the Stampeders. And then I did a deal with Jamie Stewart of the Cult, myself and Corky Lang on drums, for a project that we did called Masterstroke, and we were signed to Polygram with that. So we're doing a little songwriting right now, and I'll probably go out and do some stuff, but basically the business has been all-consuming at the moment, and that's been our focus and concentration, as opposed to going into the studio and doing that whole thing, because that's another focus and concentration, you know. Play something else for you.
Okay, maybe on the next
guitar. Because this one's kind of distorted sounding.
Yeah, can you tell me a little about, did Stevie Ray really play this, or?
Yeah, it was a loaner actually to him on the Soul to Soul record, and a collector who's into memorabilia picked it up in California, and we picked it up from him along with a gig poster with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, also signed by Stevie, which was quite cool. I had the pleasure of meeting him several times myself. I never asked him for an autograph. That's one thing over the years I've never done, is ask for autographs, although, you know, several artists have supplied, you know, signatures or what have you. But the memorabilia thing is pretty huge now. I'm also working right now on a guitar, a Jimi Hendrix Flying V out of England, which was painted by Hendrix and used on the Red House recording. So we'll see. It's been about a year. I'm checking out. Authenticity is obviously a very important thing to check out, because if we sell these instruments again, we want to make sure that before we even get close to buying it, that it's exactly what it's supposed to be.
How does the research go for you? How do you?
We'd send people out. We'd find out. We'd trace serial numbers. We'd do all that business. See if we could trace it right back to where the actual instrument was purchased, and then go from there. Try to get as many, you know, supporting sort of stories and documentation as possible, and just basically get to a point where we feel really good about it with the backup. And at that point, you know, we're sort of exhausted all potentials, and we are either satisfied or not with going ahead with doing something.
You talked about guitars being kind of an investment.
Yeah, I guess it's proven to be over the years. As early as 1963, the Martin guitars really sort of took off in terms of popularity. A very loyal group of guitar players, being the bluegrass and country people, kind of were asking the question, why do these newer guitars why don't they sound like the pre-war ones? And of course, there were certain physical reasons as to why they didn't sound exactly like those earlier maybe artists and heroes that they were used to listening to and woven into the fabric of music at that time. So they started to seek out the old instruments, and of course, with there only being several hundred Martin instruments made a week, it made for a lot of competition for very few pre-war made instruments that were like the models they were seeking. So it drove the prices up to an extraordinary amount, seemingly to those that were trying to acquire them over a very short period of time. And the same thing happened with Gibson. You know, Mike Bloomfield went to England and played in front of people like Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and all the guitar heroes, and brought a Les Paul, which was basically a discard because it was so heavy in weight. They never made that many of them, but it sounded great, and it sort of was a great integral sort of bluesy rock sounding instrument. And the English guys threw down their Telecasters and went out and sought out all these guitars, all these 59 Les Pauls, and there's a big craze of that. Jimmy Page is still identified as being one of the biggest guys to use one. This guitar is
Well worn.
well worn. It's a 1953 J50, which was used on a lot of the Mountain recordings. It's signed by Corky here, Corky Lang, who was the drummer of Mountain. But Felix Pappalardi and Leslie West used it on several tracks on the original Mountain Climbing and then several other records as well. A guitar like this is what's considered to be real memorabilia. Something was actually a used instrument, something that a band has used on a tour, versus maybe something that's been in a radio contest where it's been signed and there's been maybe multiples, or a guitar that's got a lot of signatures on it, for instance, that are a varied group of people. Because what will happen is people like the hard rock are after this type of an instrument that was actually used by the artists, versus and collectors that are really, they're also looking for signed guitars as well, but they don't have the same value as, say, something that was actually part of the history.
Do you know if this was played on any particular tunes that we were remembering?
The Laird was one, but I've got the documentation in a file, but the Laird was one of the songs, and I think also Theme for an Imaginary Western. There may have been I have another guitar actually up there that's also signed by Corky, which is a Westbury guitar. That was an artist endorsement guitar that was also used.
What, the Strat style?
No, the Strat is signed by Clapton actually, which is quite a rare thing, because Clapton's basic, I think, philosophy is that if you want one of my guitars, you get one of the Eric Clapton Stratocasters, or you get a Martin guitar with my signature on it, of which we've been very fortunate and sold 4 since February, the actual Martin signed instruments.
Yeah. So this is a 50s guitar?
This is, yeah.
How does it play?
It's not bad. Yeah.
This guy knows what he's doing. And the head there.
The
The
drum
drum?
head, yes, was used by on the front of Corky's kit for quite a few gigs, several thousand, he was saying. And that's original artwork, which is done by Gail Collins. Gail Collins, unfortunately, is the lady that murdered her husband, Felix Pappalardi, who was the producer for Cream, as well as a key member of the band Mountain, along with Leslie and Corky and Steve Knight at the time. But this particular head was used on a number of gigs and is an original piece that Gail has done. And if you note all the record or jackets from the past, you'll notice her artwork on most of them. So it's kind of a neat piece of memorabilia.
Well, your dealings with No Doubt, I see Rick. Okay. The Who. What was your dealings with the Who?
Basically, they were always looking for old parts, guitars, and that type of thing. And so, from time to time, they'll be seeking out certain pieces for certain guitars or what have you. So, we get a lot of those requests right now. Oh, there's probably 3 or 4 artists, people in the country world. We've had Garth Brooks, keyboard player, in here and stuff, you know. So it's not just rock and roll, you know. There's a number of people that come in.
Yeah, I've got lots of tape.
Oh, okay.
What's the sound? This looks fairly simple. Is it a distortion or a...
It is simple. The only thing that's different, really, or a few things that are different about it, is basically that it has a huge output. It's about 40 dB at the output, which represents probably, I would say, 3 to 4 times what you would normally get out of a regular overdrive pedal. And the reason for that is that most people that are manufacturing overdrive pedals want the pedal to fit all amplifiers in all situations. And our opinion of that is we wanted to go a little further and make an overdrive that's like really, really potent at the output. So it's like 40 dB out type of thing. It also does not have a limited, like a compressor, so there's no delay in it. So when you're playing, it's very natural. When you play soft, there's less distortion, like an amp distortion sound. When you play harder, there's more distortion. So like a good amp should work that way for you as well. In this particular way, it makes it more natural playing-wise. And it'll also make any Fender amplifier sound incredible. It's been very hard for people to find overdrives for Fender amplifiers that are functional because what they call the front end, the preamp section of an amplifier Fender, is very hard to drive, so you need a lot of output, and I think we finally come up with the right
What's
combo.
What's a pedal like this, Silver? What do you retail?
We retail these for $250. They sell for $250 in the States, so finally we get a break in Canada, basically. We sell them in the States and in Japan. And in Japan, they're yellow. They stand out a little bit better in the big counters in Akihabara where they're sold.
And where are they manufactured?
They're manufactured right here.
And how many would you make a year? Or?
Well, we're hoping that we can get them up to 1,000 a month. They're all handmade. This is not a big production item. And if somebody wants, we will voice it specifically for their amplifier, and it's also lifetime warranty.
Is there a DO2 coming out?
There is one with a built-in gate, and the DO2 basically is going to have, it's like a reverse gate. Sounds like the guitar is playing backwards. Yeah. And we also have this, which is also designed for a Marshall and a high watt amplifier and various other amps, Boogie. If you want to bring the amp in and you're interested in having it tailored to the actual amplifier, that's what we have to do because the output is so hot. If you use this in the wrong amplifier, it can sound awful. If you use it in the right amp, it sounds amazing. So you have to tailor the output, the signal, to compensate, you know, with the amplifier.
If I wanted a guitar lesson, I understand I can come here too, eh?
Yeah, actually, we have some excellent teachers, some Berkeley music grads. Mike Hall has played with the Killer Dwarfs and he's played with Donington. They're at Donington, I should say. Been around the world, played with Coney Hatch. So he's had a practical experience, but also a formal education, quite an in-depth education, and he's applying his education both with teaching here and playing gigs. He's a professional guitarist. So he can give you the practical shortcuts and is an excellent communicator, but also has the fundamental technique.
For somebody who's starting guitar, what do you would recommend for equipment to get started? Anyways, you don't have a lot of money, but you want something relative good quality.
Well, it's interesting. It used to be when people were starting to play guitar before, everyone would say, "Well, get an acoustic guitar," largely because of the expense factor. But now, if you go to a guitar and you're looking at, say, an entry-level instrument, it's pretty tough to get anything that's half decent for under $350 without really getting something that's what we would consider questionable in terms of quality. You have probably better luck in getting an electric guitar and a little amplifier for $300, which is a better quality, whereas it wasn't the case, you know, years ago when a lot of the parents were saying maybe trying to start out, what you get for your money was pretty, you know, pretty rough in terms of playability. And what would happen is you know, kids would get discouraged and they'd go and pitch the thing, you know, after several weeks of playing. So you have to have something that's half decent. It's like driving a car that's aligned versus one that's not, you know.
You buy used guitars to get people out?
Yes, we're always looking for old guitars. We pay, you know, I'm sure we beat out a lot of our American counterparts with purchasing old and vintage guitars. And we also do appraisals. So if you have a guitar and you don't know what it's worth and you want to bring it in, we can let you know. We do written appraisals for insurance purposes. We're consulting with the insurance companies on quite a regular basis with things, unfortunately, after the fact, but also in advance too, where people come in and they get appraisals done and have something for their records, you know, to show that they had the instruments and we've seen them and we know that they're original and what the values are on them. And they always appreciate every year. As far as the old instruments go, you know, I've seen original Flying V's go from $2,000 to $100,000 from the 70s till today. So it's a good thing to get an appraisal every year. If, for instance, you've got a Flying V or any other guitar, I mean, they all appreciate some.
What's the difference between a $1,000 guitar and a $100,000 guitar?
Depends really on the rarity of the instrument to a large degree. Usually the quality of the woods in some of the instances would be different if you had to make sort of that comparison. But for the most part, it's the rarity, the year that it was made, who played the instrument, who made it famous, and basically wove it into the texture of music at that given time.
Is there any way to preserve these instruments, or are they just eventually they decay because they are?
Well, with frets and mechanical, you know, things that are being sort of where there's friction involved, like frets and saddles and the machine heads, eventually, you know, can fatigue and/or wear and need to be replaced. But the wood and so on, if you adjust the neck, if you have an adjustable truss rod in a guitar, that should be done probably by somebody that's knowledgeable. We do repairs here as well to be able to take care of that type of thing. But most importantly, when you've got an acoustic instrument, it's very important that you humidify it, because in Canada, with the very cold climate in the wintertime and hot climate in the summertime, it's a fluctuation in humidity and also temperature. And it's very important, like ourselves, we like to be in the middle, so to speak. That 70 degree, not too hot, not too cold, not too dry, not too humid, is where we want to be. With the instruments in the wintertime, you have to humidify them so that they don't crack. We see a lot of beautiful instruments come in and they've lost their value because it's got a huge crack in the top, and it's just, you know, it could be prevented. So if anyone has any information or wants information on that type of thing, they can come in and we can, you know, fill them in on what to do.